Cracking the E in online learning. If you were to hear of a marketplace that's going to almost double in the next 5 years, would you be interested? The marketplace I am going to introduce you to had an income of $187 billion in 2019, expected to rise to $319 billion in 2025. And do you know what? That was the estimate before COVID-19 hit. And as we work through, you will realize almost straight away that 319 billion might have been a conservative estimate. Welcome to the world of opportunity, otherwise known as e-learning. Now is the time to get ahead of the market. The advances in But before we go any further, let me introduce myself. My name is Pat Grosse, and my story goes back to the early 1990s, inspired by Al Gore, who we all know for the climate change agenda, was actually at the time heavily involved with the concept of the information superhighway, as was Jacques Delors, at the time the president of the European Commission. And I was involved in organizing conferences that would attract 13 countries at a time. And just to prove it, this is a snippet that's still on the internet around a conference that we held in 1996, just to show that at the time we were using language such as cyberspace learning, telematics for education and training, superhighways for education, education software multimedia, technology in the classroom, and new visions of lifelong learning. So back in the 1990s, this whole concept was still new. It was exciting. It was the kickstart to where we are today. And my journey into e-learning has been quite interesting because way back in the 1990s, every December, I would be going to the online expo at Earl's Court in London. This was my annual event that I look forward to, and it was all around the progression of online information technology. And I remember on one particular occasion talking to stallholders who were so looking forward to being able to put a full-length movie onto DVD. And that at the time was 15 months away from being perfected. So it was an interesting and exciting time during the 1990s. And when I came to Australia, that continued in a role working with community education providers. And one of the first things we did was invest in a Moodle platform, a learning management system. Moodle is a standard used across the world in academic organisations around online learning and e-learning. So we were doing that right back in the early 2000s. And by 2005, 2006, we were involved in a podcasting trial. And at the time, we took up webinars. We were using Illuminate at the time, which became Blackboard Collaborate. And in 2011, I was organising webinars across the whole of Australia for the Learning Peak body. And then moving forward between 2012, 2014, I was involved in auditing the online training toolboxes and updating a couple of them. And so at the same time, I was an e-learning mentor across the state of Victoria. So e-learning has been with me for the last 30 years. Well, let me go back to 1994 and that vision for the future, just so I can demonstrate to you the passion and the energy in those days. And this vision was reported in a paper from the Department of Trade and Industry in the UK. And this was the vision for the future. Vision for an entertainment services, television, films, and interactive video games. I remember going to one of those Earl's Court expos that I mentioned, and I remember on one particular occasion going going up to a stall, and we were talking about the whole idea of being able to put a full length feature movie onto a DVD was still at the time 18 months away from being successful. Think about that, because we've moved on and on since then, but at the time this was just a dream. Video phones, from home use to international business video conferencing. We take that for granted, especially over the last few months, and our ability to use platforms such as Zoom and Skype and Google and Microsoft Teams. Teleworking, working from home using video phones and remote computers. How true is that today? This was just a vision all those years ago. Distance learning and open university over the superhighway. And if you check online now, it's amazing how many university courses you can get for free. Now, moving forward to 2021, we've got to be mindful that we are now operating in a global market. We've got the legacy of COVID-19, which led to a rapid adoption of online. But also remember that we've got a crowded online marketplace. So what will it take to stand out from the crowd? And it's not about taking analog practices onto digital platforms, and I'll explain that a little bit later. Now, I did computer studies back at school in the late 1970s, and I remember the tutor talking about necessity is the mother of invention, and I brought that with me through life. And right now, we are in that situation thanks to COVID that we've had to reinvent ourselves as businesses. And so the question is how can we do that in the e-learning space? Well, let's now consider what is e-learning. Now, according to the Oxford Dictionary, e-learning is learning conducted via electronic media, typically on the internet. Successful e-learning depends on the self-motivation of individuals to study effectively. So think about it. E-learning is about learning. So what does learning mean? Self-motivation. How do you package and promote a program that gets people motivated to take part and to study effectively? Let us now compare e-learning with physical face-to-face training in the training room. So if you're the trainer, how do you know that people are learning what you're telling them without having to refer to manuals and go through the process? How do you know how much they are remembering? What is the return on investment for that presenter? What is the satisfaction that just being in front of the class alone is going to elicit the skills and knowledge in one go? And what is the return on the investment for the audience just listening to what's being delivered to them? Now let's look at the e-learning space because you can design a program of learning that's flexible, that people can take in small chunks if they want to, bite-sized learning, or they can learn at a time when they're available. It can be it will be a structured learning program so that you can design so that the person learns step by step and embed what they learn, that they can repeat until that knowledge is embedded. So if they don't understand the first time, they can repeat what they've just been through till they get it right. Think about that on a stage. You couldn't really invest the time to go back, or if you did, you wouldn't capture the full information. I've been to on a few times when I've been twice to an event, listened to a speaker twice, and I've got different information each time. Same presentation, but my focus has been different. Well, when you're using e-learning, you can go back as many times as you want, so you can capture more information. That if you're the designer of an e-learning program, you can incorporate opportunities for contact between the people, the learners in your program, contact between you and them, or a forum. There's many ways that you can create ongoing contact, and of course you can build a community. I want to introduce you to the International Journal of Education and Research with an article on the characteristics of e-learning, described as it can be done anywhere, anytime, and by anyone. That it provides reflection opportunities, so you can design your program, and at certain points in the program, you can build in the questions for somebody to reflect on their learning to that point. It's about effective learning because it allows the learner to learn in the style that they're most effective for them, which could be auditory, it could be visual, it could be reading, writing, it could be kinesthetic, whatever their learning style is. If you design the program properly, you're catering for the different needs. It also can be designed for people with disabilities. It's just in time, so you can go back and you can, first of all, you can repeat what you've done, but you can also choose when you want to study that module. It's friendly, it's easy using. A good e-learning program is designed to make it easy from you to go from step A to step B. It's personalized learning because as you develop in your knowledge, it's all about you, the learner. And of course, the certificate at the end has got your name on it. There's less impact on the environment because it's online. It's not face to face. There's no transport costs. There's no material costs. There's no energy costs apart from the use of technology. Here are some interesting facts and figures. When asked, 60% of internet users reported that online courses are preferable to fit their lifestyles and schedules. E-learning has just come of age. 1998, 1999, that's when the phrase was first coined. E-learning is one of the top training methods in organizations of any kind. And e-learning students said to learn 5 times more material for every hour of training that they do face to face. Now that is good return on investment. Right, in this section, I just want to quickly demonstrate why some people who have put their programs online are starting to go a little bit wrong. It's not about taking what you present to an audience, record it, and then that's, lesson one, record lesson two, record lesson three. That's probably where you're starting to fall down, because what you're doing is presenting to people, not necessarily enabling them to learn. So when you're putting together an e-learning program, you have to design how it's going to work with the following in mind. We're talking about adult learning principles, and that's called andragogy, as opposed to pedagogy, which is how you teach children. So when you're presenting or preparing a course, be very mindful of what it is that your client needs to know, why they need to know it, what their needs are, and what their goals are. So you will present your program very much like you're thinking about marketing in a way, what they want, what they need to know, why they need to know it, what their needs. But their goals are learning goals. And so very much in the introduction and for each of the units, show them up front what it is they're going to learn and what the outcome will be. Self-concept, they like to be self-directed. They like to be able to make a choice and make their own decisions. So again, building opportunities for the learner who's taken your course to look at what they learn. You could give them options, little modules which are options. They can pick and choose what they want. Sometimes you can put together a package again where they may wish to do this, and this. They need a choice and they need to make their own decisions. So when you're going through, you might design some questions, but you're getting them to think about and come to their own conclusions. And those conclusions are the ones that you're trying to get them to, but you don't talk at them, you get them to work them out for themselves. Consider the role of the learner's experience. They may already have a level of experience in the area that you're talking about. So talk to that experience. It could be a life experience, it could be a employment experience, it could be a management experience, but respect that experience when you're designing your program. Their readiness to learn. Think about that as well. They will be ready to learn by the time that they come to your program. It's not something that you're trying to teach because you've got to get people in the room like the children. This is people are coming and they're ready and they're willing to learn from you. So you'd better deliver. And then the orientation to learning. Make sure that you can get them to think about their life-centered learning. They will be problem solving in their learning, so that they are involved in the learning process and that they're motivated to learn. Okay, so what do you need? What do you need? You need a learning management system, an LMS for short. And you can find these on the internet. If you have access to your back end of your website development and cPanel, there are a list of free learning management systems that can be brought into your system. Or if you're not that kind of technically minded, you can download a learning management system by subscription or pay for one straight off the internet, and all the hard work is taken out it's out for you, so it's easy for you to put together your education program content. You need authoring tools which are HTML5 compliant and SCORM compliant, and there is two more compliances as well that you could be looking at depending on your program. But SCORM and HTML are the two main ones. Now, SCORM means that you can have an interactive, small little package that you can move from one platform to another. It's fully portable. That's what it means. So, very much about learning, e-learning, is that you can have interactive elements, and these little interactive elements, their coding and their software is packaged into what we call SCORM compliance framework, so they can be then moved from one system to another. What you need is a storyboard, and basically it's how you're going to design your learning. Now, somebody asked me, okay, so we've got a training manual, how do we then translate that? And I've done quite a bit of work in that area, and I've also looked at face-to-face programs where people have got all their manuals and their content. And basically, the way I work on storyboarding is just as simple as using PowerPoint and simplifying what the manuals are saying. So instead of having a 1 or 2 pages, you can actually condense that down into a visual audio format that is simpler to read, and it's basically breaking it down into bite-sized chunks, simplified language, but still gets a message across effectively. And if you design a storyboard, which I'm saying is, how to get to 1, 2, 3, 4, then make sure that you think about the different learners who are auditory, kinesthetic, visual, reading, writing, etc. When you're doing a storyboard, I would think of it as this. You would have an introduction. Then you would have what would be Unit 1, Unit 2. So break it down into units. It could be, I've done programs where there's been 10 units. So they're like the top headings for each area. And then within each unit, I would be breaking down the content into 3 to 5 maximum topics. And then within each topic, which is where the real learning content is, that it will be broken down by maybe some text, maybe a video, an interview, some self-assessment questions, and some interactive, and what we call them is learning objects. Now, I mentioned SCORM. These learning objectives might be small, sort of mini courses within a course, which can then be transported into that unit and into that topic. And that's why we talk about being SCORM compliant. So you would design your structure of your course. So you would have the introduction, you would have, if it's a big course, you would have a learner guide. So to show the learner how the course is structured and how they can go through it. So it's like a navigation as well as an instruction about what the content's all about. So you'd have the introduction with the learner guide. You would have your units, 1, 2, 3, how many you need. Then underneath each unit, you would have 3 to 5 topics maximum. And then within each topics, you would have the content. And in the content, you would have what I call the learning objects, or those small mini experiences. And learning objects, they can be designed. There's plenty of what we call authoring tools, which are there on the market to help you to put them together. Now I'm going to demonstrate some content tools, and these are examples of what you could find in some of the authoring software that's out there in the marketplace. And these examples are taken from the iSpring suite, but as I said, this is just one example. But you'll find that across the authoring tools, there seems to be a consistency of the core of the kind of things that you can do. So, for example, I'll pick a couple of options here. On the left-hand side, there's some examples of how you can test how much people have learnt. So, for example, we've got the multiple choice selection here, and you could be presenting to somebody some complex information or something they need to read through or to watch thoroughly. And at the end of it, you want to make sure that they thoroughly understand. So you give them three statements. And the idea being then is that you test them to make sure that they understand by correcting the right statement. And you can give them as many chances as you want to get it right. So you might decide that you need to get this right first time, or you might give them up to 2 or 3 chances. Another example is the true and false questions. This is a really, really good one as you're working through the process and you want just the learner to just do a quick understanding. So you'll just put a statement out there: is this true or false? And obviously they've got a 50% chance of getting it right. Another one to look at is the sequencing. Now, with respect to sequencing, this can be either in word order, so that could be a list of a process, or it could be in images. And this is really, really good if you're working with tradies, for example, and there's a process, a plumbing process, and you might need to put the images in the right order, especially if you're working with tradies who are more visually oriented to learning than to just by reading textbooks, for example. Another one to look at is looking at hotspots. Now, this one is a really, really good one. I can give you the example of occupational health and safety. And I had an image of a table, a desk that was overflowing with paperwork. And there was a bin that had been turned upside down, and there was a lamp with a frayed wiring. Now, the learner here would have to use their mouse to select 3 areas in that image that was a health and safety hazard. So that creates that visual, that participation, and it's a long way from just reading about it. Now, on the right-hand side, we've got some examples here of what we call interactions. And what we mean to say there is you can go through a presentation, you can read and read the next and read the next slide, and it becomes a little bit monotonous. But you can break that down visually. For instance, you could have steps. And so if you've got a process, for example, and you would get the person to click step 1, step 2, step 3. So they're having to interact to go through the process, and they can go backwards as well. Timeline is really good if you are working on a timeline. It could be a planning timeline. The example I would like to bring up is a marketing timeline that I recently put together for a client, and it went back to the days of Pompeii and Herculaneum, and we were talking about fish sauce as branding. But when you put a timeline together, it helps the person to understand the concept of time and distance. There's also a process, and you can demonstrate a process by going through 1, 2, 3. It's all within the same slide format, but all the person has to do is to tick, the next, just select with their mouse the next step in the process. And again, you can create a hotspot diagram. And the frequently asked questions one I'm showing there is very much around being able to get somebody to select one of those segments, and then the wording will, the description will come. That's horizontal, and if you did it vertical, then you'll be doing that by tabs. So here's a couple of examples that I've used in some of my training. For instance, this one on the left-hand side is one that I put together around do-it-yourself strategic planning. So again, I wanted to test that people understood. And where you see that select, if you press that down arrow, you'd get a choice of 3 different options. So it was just to test that they'd taken in and understood the information that I'd given them. In this one, this is a little bit of, again, understanding the meaning of three different words in a process. And the idea then is to, like a jigsaw puzzle, is to match the right statement with the word. And then here's an example. And again, this is back to strategic planning, and it's true or false. It's just a quick self reflection as you're going along, just to make sure that the learner understands. So, here are some keys to a successful e learning course. First, when you design the content, design so that you are talking to the learner. Don't do it as a third party. When the learner opens the program, they can see that you are talking directly to them. So think about the language that you use. Keep it simple. Don't use language and wording which is too technical, because at the end of the day, it's not about that. It's about getting the learning through to the person that you're in contact with. Structure. Structure your program. Look at, again, as I mentioned earlier, with an introduction, units, modules, lessons, whatever you want to call them. Within them, you've got the topics, so you can break them down into topics, and then you break them down further into learning objects. What I didn't say is make the last unit I call it a library. So all the resources that I've introduced across the units, and even a workbook or some kind of manual, I've also added it at the end as a separate unit in a way, but it's just basically the library. If you're going to do an e-learning course, make it interactive. As I sort of suggested earlier, what you find is if somebody just presents on Zoom, and then expects somebody to then, just pick up that information. The next group, you might have had some interaction in the first group with people who have listened, but then you record it, and then the next people are listening, and they're just listening to a presentation with interaction from somebody else. They're not really involved in the process. All they are doing is listening to a presentation made to another group. So yes, you can use those presentations, but this is where you bring the E into it, and that's when you start to use that video as the first step, and then underneath create some learning content with some interaction, so that a person feels as though they're part of the experience. Create rewards and a certificate. Rewards as you go along, maybe a badge or something every time you finish a module or unit, and a certificate at the end. And allow for feedback. And when I say auditable, I mean that the feedback gives you enough information so that you can go back and make changes to improve the e-learning program. It's always about a process of continuous improvement. What added value can the E bring to your training delivery online? If you want to know more, give me a call, Pat Grosse, pat@thecommunityentrepreneur.com, or phone me on Australia, so that's +61 0407 450 818. And let's discuss how we can put the E into your e-learning programs.